I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole for Monday, December 3rd, 2012 to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Brady. Present. Mr. Germana.
Here.
Excuse me. Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Here. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Rogers. Ms. Simon. Here. Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Ms. Conley.
Here.
There's a quorum.
I'd like to make a motion to mark Mr. Gallagher's absence from the meeting as excused.
Second.
The motion is to excuse the absence of Councilman Gallagher. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The motion is approved and the absence of Councilman Gallagher is marked excused. The next item on the agenda is public comment related to the agenda. Jean, do we have anybody signed in?
Mr. Chairman, no one has signed in to speak, but I'd like to recognize and call the roll for Mr. Rogers. Here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next item is the approval of the minutes from November 27th, 2012, which are in your packet. And is there a motion relative to those minutes? Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Schron and seconded by Councilman Brady to approve the minutes from the November 27th meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the minutes for November 27th, 2012 are approved. We now move to the items referred to committee, and if there is no objection, I would like to take the resolution for the Metro Health budget first. And hearing no objection, Ms. Jean, would you please read item B into the record?
Resolution number 2012-0251, a resolution approving the Metro Health System year 2013 budget in accordance with Ohio Revised Code section 339.06B, with the understanding that the allocation of county funds to the system will be made through adoption of the biennial operating budget and capital improvements program annual update for 2013, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. The Law Department has advised that we pass a separate resolution approving the Metro Health budget for 2013. The resolution states that the allocation of county funds to the Metro Health System will be done through the 2013 budget update. We heard from Metro Health at the hearing on November 14th, and no proposals have been made to change the Metro Health subsidy. So I consider this resolution to be a formality. We do commiserate with Metro Health on not being able to complete the hiring of their new CEO. We know that you would rather be preparing for the Affordable Health Care Act and dealing with other health care issues than having to return to the search process, and we wish you the very best of success. We have a motion to, and would that be with a recommendation for second reading suspension?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Brady and seconded by the Council President to recommend resolution 2012-0251 to the full council for consideration for passage under second reading suspension. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I have to do one of your technical corrections. Section 2 says to Dr. Brennan, isn't this the guy that didn't come?
That is.
So we need to just change that.
Okay.
The clerk of council being hereby instructed to transmit this resolution to Matthew Rubino, often, but Dr. John Brennan, I just don't say the president of Metro Health or some generic term, whoever, or maybe just to this Jeffrey Rooney, just take that name out altogether.
The temporary president.
Well, I think we should send him to the fiscal officer. Shouldn't that be enough?
Who is the acting CEO?
Is there an acting?
Okay.
Then put it back to Mark.
So we can, so the motion is to change Mr. Brennan's name back to Mark Moran?
Yes.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Okay, ayes have it. The resolution is amended, and so the question is on the merits. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'm now going to call for the yeas and nays on the referral of the motion, the resolution as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. The resolution as amended is recommended for passage with the recommendation for second reading suspension. Okay, we will now move back to resolution 2012-0232, which is the 2013 budget update. Ms. Jean, please read the resolution.
Resolution number 2012-0232, a resolution adopting the biennial operating budget and capital improvements program annual update for 2013 and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. This is the fourth hearing on the budget update for 2013, and we're at the time of consideration of amendments. We're going to take them in the order that are on the sheet that's been passed out, starting with the Adams Board. And the Adams Board testified at the last meeting that it is already their policy to use the county subsidy only for programmatic expenses and would have no problem with our including language to that effect. So I call upon Councilman Greenspan to move amendment number 1.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chair, I move that Amendment 1 be adopted and part of the budget package. This is very similar to the action we took last year with Metro Health. Once again, I believe it sends a strong message to those who supported the levy and even those who did not, that it is this council's objective to ensure that funds are dedicated to those individuals who need the service and not towards administrative expenses.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilman Greenspan, seconded by Councilman Brady. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The motion is carried and amendment number 1 is included in the resolution. The Adams Board presented information relating to extraordinary issues they had to deal with this past year, especially the closing of Bridgeway. And in response, I call upon Councilman Brady to offer amendment number 2.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer amendment number 2, which appropriates $500,000 to, in consideration for the significant amount of money that over $600,000 that Adams Board laid out, not to mention all the time and effort that had to be involved to clean up after the collapse of Bridgeway suddenly last spring. This is will not fully reimburse the Adams Board, but is a significant amount, and I move this amendment.
It's been moved by Councilman Brady and seconded by Councilman Germana for amendment number 2. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and amendment number 2 is included as part of the resolution. I would like to move amendment number 3. As we discussed at the last meeting, we need to provide bridge funding of $5,000 to enable Hands-On of Northeast Ohio to properly operate the Stand Down program, a resource fair for the homeless, to be held at the Public Auditorium on January 6, 2013. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. For amendment number 3, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and amendment number 3 is included in the resolution. I would like to also move amendment number 4. This amendment provides $742,058 in additional funding for the Office of County Prosecutor. Of that amount, $442,058 funds the mortgage fraud unit and enables the office to maintain their state-mandated reserve in the delinquent tax fund. The remaining $300,000 enables the prosecutor's office to continue the initial implementation of the Archer pay equity process started last year into 2013. However, we noted that some of the raises granted last year did not seem to be Archer-related. We asked the prosecutor's office to review these raises and to determine whether all were consistent with the policy of using money available for salary adjustments to correct clear pay equity imbalances before considering other raises and to correct as needed. We are not acting on the main body of the Archer study recommendations, as that work has not yet been completed, but hope to act on such recommendations for both the prosecutor's office and the public defender's office when those study results become fully completed. We also did not fund the requested salary additions at this time. The prosecutor's office has a large number of vacancies and will have more, due both to the change of leadership after a long tenure and the PERS changes. We believe the office will be able to hire many or all of the requested personnel within the recommended funding level. We intend to review the prosecutor's office when mid-year numbers are in. Is there a second to the amendment? I'll second. Okay. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
two questions. So the 742 is divided up between two uses. One, the mandate from the state of 442, correct? And the remaining 300, I'm sorry? 442. And then $300,000, so that's one item, and then $300,000 was to complete the Archer study, is that correct?
No. What the second item relates to is that in September of 2012, the prosecutor's office granted a number of raises to personnel, of which many but not all seemed to be Archer study related in that they were very low salaries under what would seem to be the minimum of the recommended pay bands. However, unlike what was done for a lot of other departments, the cost of these raises was not carried over into the 2013 budget, and if we were to do so, it would require an additional funding of $709,000. The feeling was not to provide the full $709,000 at this time, but to provide some so that the prosecutor's office would not have to immediately rescind all the raises, but could review them and start them, and we could review it more comprehensively at another time. So that was the thinking.
So we're effectively ratifying raises that were offered by the prosecutor.
That's correct to some degree.
Is it possible, Mr. Chair, to break these out into two amendments, one for the 442 and the other for the 300,000?
Well,
Something like that if we could. I would second that.
what I would recommend is that if you don't support including the 300,000, that you should make a motion to move to amend the amendment by deleting by changing the number to 442,058, and if that amendment passes, then we would just have the one item, and So that would enable us to consider both issues.
Okay, Mr. Chair, then at this time, I'd like to make a motion to amend Amendment 4 for the amount to be amended to $442,058 for the specific purpose of the, what's the definition of the state mandate?
Of the, paying for the mortgage fraud unit and enabling the state, the office to maintain their mandated reserve in the delinquent tax fund.
Okay, did the clerk get that? Can I go ahead? I'll
Okay.
make that
So,
motion with the language added by the chair.
So the motion to amend the amendment has been made, it has been seconded. Ms. Simon,
Yeah, I just was going to second it, but you could.
seconded.
So, go. In terms of this vote on amendment, I'm in support of this because I believe it's prudent for this council to consider all raises at one time when the Archer study is fully completed and we have access to that, and we're going to look at the Archer study and see how it would impact these raises that were made prior to the departure of former Prosecutor Mason, for us to make sure that those are within the bands, and as well with the Public Defender's Office to look at all those together. And there's no harm in that because we're coming back shortly, I believe. I don't think it's going to be too long till we have a chance to look at all of those numbers. And so I think it's important we look at everything. And then at that point, we can ratify if it's within the Archer study recommendation.
Okay. Councilman Tron.
And I would concur in that it seems unfair to have a smaller group that receive the raises and the benefits when the rest of the group that's going to be affected by the Archer study is not going to receive the benefits. And I think what it would do is accelerate the desire for everybody to get the Archer study done, move on, and let's get it addressed. And if we need to, I mean, it's not beyond their own possibility of even doing a retroactive back to January 1st if that's what the Archer study would yield out there. So I'm not adverse to the raises or the concept. It's just that we've, by doing this, we've identified a small group, less than, it sounds like based on the dollars, less than half of the dollars. So therefore, I assume it's going to less than half the people. So you could be sitting right next to somebody in the prosecutor's office, one getting a raise and the one not getting a raise, and it just seems to me to be an unfair treatment on that. So as unkind as it might be to roll it back, it's also unkind, I think, to treat one group differently than the other group when the Archer study, I believe, is going to address it in the totality of the entire prosecutor's office.
Okay. Thank you. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just for clarity, those raises have already been in effect for the past year?
The raises were given approximately in September of 2012, so they've been in effect for about 3 months.
So if the next amendment that I assume will come as a result of us separating this does not pass, does that mean that those people will have to revert to their old salaries?
Well, it would be a question of whether the prosecutor's office could continue the raises within the existing appropriation structure, because as we've pointed out, they do have a good number of vacancies. And so they could decide to continue the raises with existing funds. That would probably prevent them from doing some of the other initiatives that they hope to do. So they would have to make a choice. We would not be in a position to tell them exactly how to spend the money that we allocate for personnel.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I understand and appreciate where the councilmen who have spoken in favor of this amendment are coming from, and they've made some good points. I think that it would be more practical to go forward with the chairman's recommendation, and I think that given the presentation that we had, that this is that this is a fair accommodation to the prosecutor as he finds himself in a situation of only being in office for less than 2 months and needing to deal with these issues. And I think the chairman has put forward a very reasonable amendment, and I am in support of I am not in support of Mr. Greenspan's amendment, with all due respect.
Councilman Germana.
Without having to repeat everything that Councilman Brady said, I think this council believes in the Archer study, even though it's not done. If part of it's done, we're going to, this council is not just handing out money without having some kind of study. I think we believe in the Archer system of making sure that these salaries are comparable to other county prosecutor situations, and I think we ought to give the prosecutor some latitude. He's newly elected. We know from prior testimony that Prosecutor Mason was each year sending money back to the county that they didn't use, and I don't think Prosecutor McKinney is just going to burn through this, so I'm going to be voting no.
Mr. Chair, I just want to state that we don't know even to whom these raises were given offhand. This might not be somebody, Councilman Germana, that was underpaid or not. We don't have enough information. That's fine. I understand. I want to give the new prosecutor the benefit of the doubt and room to work, but I believe when we come back pretty quickly with the Archer study, then we can actually look at what was specifically given, but you're making assumptions that we don't have any corroboration to confirm. So I think it makes sense to just, again, I'm not going to repeat, but we did pass a 2-year budget that was, in mind that we're going to be looking at an Archer study, and this was done in a midnight hour in a midnight fashion rather than waiting for the study to come out. So that's the unfortunate circumstance that we're in now. But to ratify something like that, I don't think it's fair.
Councilman Trot.
And I would support Councilman Simon's comments to Mr. Germana, because we don't really know who's receiving these raises. And the irony might be that if it turns out that we are promoting this today, it could be in detriment to actually the way this study would come out on a particular point and particular individual. So it's always disappointing, I think, at the 11th hour when somebody does this on the way out the door, that you don't have, and knowing full well that we were in the middle of a study to do this. And so that's my disappointment with the prosecutor, and giving the benefit of the doubt on the way out the door, that you always get that smell test, and it just doesn't pass the smell test, unfortunately, on the way out the door. So I just think that it's better, in fairness to all the people, just to give it a fresh look with the Archer study.
Councilman Germana.
I understand what my colleagues have said. The fact of the matter is, in this county, the who that got the raises and how much, a lot had to do with who. The Archer study's taking that away, because it's not who, it's the positions. Are the positions paying the right amount? So, for that reason, if the Archer study has ruled on certain positions, I'm going to be voting no.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Germana, we don't have that data. This is not these raises were not given consistent with an Archer study. It wasn't done. I think there's some confusion. It was done without an Archer study.
To hopefully provide some clarification, the prosecutor's office presented the September recommendations as an initial first step implementation of the Archer program. However, it is clear that some of the people that were granted raises are people who would seem to be below what would be the minimum of the pay band and would get a raise under the Archer process, but some, but not all. So there is appropriate concern. Is there any further discussion? Councilman Jones.
I'm clear, this 442,000 being given to employees who are being moved out of the prosecutor's office. That,
No, the purpose of the 442,000 is that the county prosecutor's office has a mortgage fraud unit. And prior to this year, the mortgage fraud unit was funded from the tax delinquent assessment fund. However, early in the year, a special opportunity was created when the state offered to match money provided locally to do demolition work. And so the county prosecutor's office took $5,000 or $5 million from the delinquent tax fund and used it to match an equal amount from the state, providing us $10 million to do needed demolitions in the community. This resulted in the delinquent tax fund having not enough money to meet its state-mandated reserve requirement. So this basically provides the money needed to just continue the existing positions in the mortgage fraud unit, because there is not currently sufficient money in the delinquent tax fund after the reserve requirement to support those positions. So, we conferred with Director Rubino on this. He advised us that it's something that we really are pretty much mandated to do. So hopefully the 442,000 is not in too much question, but the question is whether to provide the additional 300,000. Okay. Any other discussion? If not, we're gonna ask the clerk to call the roll. And to clarify it, if you vote yes, you're voting in favor of the amendment to the amendment that Councilman Greenspan offered, which would delete the additional $300,000 in funding, so that we would fund only the 442,000 related to the mortgage fraud unit, but we would hold off the entire question about the raises until later. If you vote no, it would be to maintain the amendment as it is, providing the 442,000 plus the 300,000.
Chairman,
Yes.
before we vote on that, I just, for further clarity, I'm looking at the sheet that was distributed by the prosecutor's office regarding potential increases. And under initiative number 1, it says Archer study implemented at 709,000. Where's this 300,000?
Okay. The intent of the 300,000 is actually to partially fund item number 1. Our thinking was not to provide enough. This is the money that would carry over the raises that were already granted into 2013. But we decided not to provide the full 709,000 that would fund the raises for the entire year, but that we would provide enough money to continue those raises into 2013 part way, and hopefully, in the meantime, the raises could be reviewed and the full Archer results could come in, and we could look at it more comprehensively. So that's where the 300,000 number came from. The other option is to vote yes on the amendment, and we would not provide any money toward that item number 1, and we would wait until the Archer results are completed and deal with it then.
And under the description, it says that this was a 2012 partial increase were given to APAs whose pay was not at the minimum entry-level pay based on the prior 2006 salary survey. So I guess I'm confused on, is this part of the was this done as part of a Archer study that was completed, that particular category of employee, or was this done to some other 2006 salary surveys? That's something totally different.
There are a variety of interpretations of what was done in September of 2012. It does appear that at least some of a good number of the raises were given to people whose salary is very low and what would be below the minimum of the pay bands that's going to come out of the Archer study. And as they're presenting it there, they used a prior 2006 study to make an initial first step, but we don't have full details on what their methodology was in doing that action in September of 2012.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Schwan and then Simon.
Based on Councilman Rogers' queries there, the $300,000, is that designed to go to individuals or to be spread across all the individuals on a per capita basis? Having a hard time understanding how 300,000 is going to cover the need for 700,000 that's been identified. And is that going to go to select people, or is it going to go to across the board to bring everybody up a slight amount?
Our authority as a budgeter is to provide money under personnel, and then the director of each office decides how to allocate it. Our conception is that if they continued all of the raises, that it would enable them to continue them through about May, before which hopefully further review would be completed. But at the same time in my presentation, I had asked the prosecutor's office to review the raises and to see if they're all consistent with the Archer process, and perhaps a decision might be made that some of them should be rolled back. But that's we can't try to get in the middle of that process, except to perhaps express some concern and say they ought to take a look at it. But that's my best answer.
But we are getting in the middle of it if we're saying we're concerned about the rollback, and so we are actually getting in the middle of that process. If the concern is the rollback, and if part of the group got a September raise and it's going to go all the way through to May, there's a bigger part that didn't get any raise from September to May that we are actually getting in the middle of, because we're saying we're going to treat them differently than all those folks who haven't received the benefit of the Archer study.
I was going to.
Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say the exact thing. By doing this, we are inserting ourselves into this decision-making process, because then we're going to be asked after the Archer study is completed then to look at what we ratified, and if it's inconsistent, then it's going to be on us to have to roll it back and be the ones who have to take money away. Don't put us in that position. And Councilman Rogers is right. We don't want to take raises down, but that's not the effect of this. If we wait till the Archer study, these people aren't going to lose their raises. Come on. There's vacancies right and left that are not filled, that are currently unfilled, and that money will provide the salary consistency for these people who got raises. Good for them. But it would be totally ridiculous for us now to come in and say, okay, we're going to reward this behavior, but the people on the ground will not be penalized because the money's there. And I want Councilman Jones and Rogers to be clear about that. We're not taking money away. We're just waiting to get the full picture to make sure everybody's treated fairly. I don't know, this could be just one person who's getting a big raise. We don't know. And for us to inject ourselves in this process, at the end of the day, puts us as the villains if somehow there has to be a rollback.
Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Greenstein.
Just to kind of hopefully cap this off, we're being put in a position to basically, we have been put in a position to, where a request is made for us to give, instead of coming and asking for permission, we're being asked to provide funding for what very well may be an inequitable salary increase process. And the fallback position is the Archer study. It's not ready yet. Wait for it to be ready, and then we'll make the appropriate adjustments at that time. But to come and ask for permission, ask for forgiveness instead of permission is not the right way to approach this.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Again, I think the points have been well made, and I do understand them. We're in which is not so unusual for us, an area that I consider to be fairly gray. But what I would like to do is not hold the new prosecutor responsible for what the old prosecutor did, and let the new prosecutor have an opportunity to start running his office without any decent transition time involved, and for us to work with him in a positive way. And I think that the amendment as it stands without the being amended is a good faith effort to do that. We were all here, we heard the presentation. They certainly asked for a lot more than they're getting, and that was bold. Let's give the prosecutor an opportunity to run his office and not hold him responsible for what happened before he got there.
Mr. Chair, and I agree. I certainly don't want to give the new prosecutor a hard time, but I would ask of him to work with us. We're handed something now also. So it's a reciprocal new relationship. And if we move quickly to get this Archer study, I don't think the prosecutor's office is going to miss a beat. I'm not opposed to raises. I just want a comprehensive review.
I would just add that the idea that the 300,000 partially funds item number 1 is only one possible interpretation. The fact is that the prosecutor's office asked for the money for the mortgage fraud unit. They asked for money for to continue the raises. They asked for $1.2 million additional to implement the Archer study. They asked for $1.5 million for new staff to implement various initiatives. They asked for $162,000 in anticipation of additional termination payments, and I felt that we should be pretty cautious. But I did think that giving them the $442,000 that's kind of legally required and nothing more is maybe too cautious, and I think that we just put in a number as to what their personnel expenses are authorized at, and I felt that the 300,000 on top of the legally required amount was a fair result. But I see it both ways, and I just ask if there's any further discussion. And so we're going to call the roll, and again, a yes vote is to reduce the item to $442,000 for the mortgage fraud unit, and a no vote would keep the amendment as it is, which includes the $442,000 plus the $300,000. Okay.
Right, calling the roll. Mr. Miller.
No.
Mr. Brady.
No.
Mr. Germana.
No.
Mr. Schron.
Yes.
Ms. Conwell.
No.
Mr. Jones.
No.
Mr. Rogers.
No.
Ms. Simon.
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan.
Yes.
And Ms. Conley.
No.
The motion does not carry.
Okay, the amendment to the amendment does not become a part of the amendment, so the amendment is still the question in its original form, and the question is whether there's any additional discussion on amendment number 4. Yes, Councilman Schott.
I'll be voting for the amendment on the basis that the mortgage fraud unit, in my opinion, trumps my issues that I preferred to have gone the other way. And as a result, I will be supporting that in the hopes that when we get down to the full Archer study, that there truly is a blending of what was done on the 300,000.
Okay.
I agree with that, and when we do get the Archer study, we might be looking at backing out some salaries, and I hope we stay on course with that.
Agreed. I think the idea of dealing with the Archer study expeditiously as soon as we can is a good one. Any further discussion? Yes.
And I just want to, I was reviewing the exhibit here. You know, the prosecutor's budget is $29 million. This $300,000 is not a blank check. It's just part of his budget.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman
I'm
Greenspan.
sorry. I'm going to vote against this on the simple grounds. A line has to be drawn in the sand as to what you're going to tolerate, what you're not. I'm not tolerating the attitude of asking forgiveness instead of permission. So I agree with my colleagues that the 442 needs to be funded, but in theory, on the overall concept of where the additional money is coming from, I'm challenged enough by it that I'll not support it.
Okay. Is there anybody else who's intending to vote against amendment number 4?
Yeah, I'm going to vote against it. I'm changing my position.
Okay. We'll do a roll call.
Okay, calling the roll on the original amendment with the original amount of $742,058. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes.
Mr. Germana.
Yes.
Mr. Schron.
Yes.
Ms. Conwell.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Ms. Simon.
No.
Mr. Greenspan.
No.
Ms. Conley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Amendment number 4 becomes part of the resolution. I would like to move amendment number 5. We held lengthy discussions about the projected operating deficits in the Health and Human Services levy funds. While current projected expenses are below what is budgeted, the administration asked us to wait until early next year to amend the Health and Human Services portion of the budget. We are agreeing to do so, but including language for a specific timetable for receiving both those proposed amendments and then a longer-range plan to correct the operating deficits. The proposed amendments for 2013 will be due on February 19th of next year, allowing them to reflect the year-end 2012 numbers. The longer-range plan for 2014 to 2017 will be due on May 14th, 2013, allowing the first quarter 2013 numbers to be factored in. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on amendment number 5?
Yeah,
Yes,
Chair.
Councilman Greenspan.
Let me just, if we, in general, I'm trying to understand exactly where we are right now in the process to recap. So the administration has provided us with a budget from 2013 to 2015, correct?
Correct.
Has that, has that been amended to be the legislation that we're just voting on? That's correct?
The legislation that we're voting on only relates to 2013, although they have provided us some preliminary information that goes farther. But the actual subject of this resolution is just the 2013 update.
If we were to, and looking at the two budgets, the 2012 and 2013, the one we adopted, versus the 2013 to 2015 that is before us, just on the Health and Human Service side, if we were not to accept that budget, the 2013 and 2015 budget, then the administration would have to perform under the 2012 to 2013 budget, correct? That would be the budget, the operating platform they would be under.
The only thing that is before us in this resolution is to adopt a 2013 update, which is a set of revisions to the second half of the 2012 to 2013 biennial budget, which we passed last year. If we were not to pass this resolution, we would continue to be operating under the original version of the 2012 to 2013 biennial budget.
The reason I bring that up is because in looking at the two side by side, the expenditure side is about $8 million, I'm just speaking in round numbers, about $8 million more under the 2013 budget, and the revenue was down by about $4 million. I would rather take the 2012-2013 budget, which has a deficit of $3.4 million, instead of the budget presented that shows a deficit of $15.19 million. And that's kind of where I'm going with it. So I need to understand this is tied to that. If we vote no on the 2013-15 proposal, then the administration performs on the budget that was originally presented that we voted on. They use less reserves, even though revenue may be down by $4 million. The expenses are also less. So I understand where you're going with this, but I need to understand what this is going to possibly pertain to and what our options are.
Director Steen, do you wish to comment on this?
Wade Steen, Fiscal Officer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pass out, this was some information that was previously provided so that I can make sure, and I'll wait till that works its way around. And what I would like to do, as that's made its way around, is to point to where you can always find that, because I don't want, I spoke with Councilmember Greenspan and others about projections and why I was very comfortable when I said $27 million is not going to be the deficit. If you went to the quarterly budget, it's page Roman numeral 213. You got this book some time ago, and every time you get a quarterly, it's in there, the projection. And then you go, we updated that. The book was prepared on November 13th. November 26th, last Monday, we were asked to update our projections. In the box, that's Chloe outlined, that's where we believe you'll be. So it's not a $27 million deficit, it's 13.6. I just cut the deficit in half. So it's 13.6, and we've accounted for reductions in revenue, but if you look at those spending line items, many have changed dramatically. Boarding care of children, for example, we project that to be $33.5 million. It's not going to be the $39 million. You're budgeting next year, that's what was approved, $38 million. Again, we don't believe that's the correct number, but as I stand here today, I think that projection column for 2013 is approximately where you will be. So it won't be a $27 million deficit. It will be more like a 13.6. And again, that's assuming that we don't make any more spending reductions as we get toward the end of the year. So I wanted to be clear that we're not saying there's not an issue that we have to address as far as spending, but it's not a $27 million deficit that we're looking at, but it's probably a $13 million deficit next year, a little bit more, a little bit less, but that's something that we have to work on. So I wanted to make sure that everyone had the projection that we're looking at. And maybe I think that helps in some ways understand why when we put forward the original budget and said we would make modifications, I did not really seem harried at that point because I knew what we were looking at through this year, and that is what you see in the box before you.
Councilman Greenspan.
Well, you know, my statement is I don't like looking at stuff like this handed and then expected to make comments on it. My inclination is to ask for a 15-minute recess, but I don't know if that's going to happen either, because to be presented information on such a heavy subject like this and then instantly be able to render a decision or even provide comment, I think is a little disingenuous to this council.
With all due respect to the council member, this was provided to you a week ago. It's dated November 26th. This was given to everyone prior to that meeting. You've had it for at least 7 days, if not more.
Well, then I'll continue on. Then it appears that we actually have a $25 million. When does the PA fund run out of money? 2016, I believe. So if we were operating in 2016 numbers, we'd actually have a $25.6 million deficit, correct? The PA fund was not available.
No, Mr. Chairman and Councilman Greenspan, we're assuming using PA funds for the next three years. And the PA balance will fluctuate each year because we're going to be getting reimbursement from the state. And we'll also be doing a reconciliation each year. We'll be doing a reconciliation early next year for 2012, and we'll continue that process each time. So that number is in flux each year, but we're anticipating being able to utilize or offset the levy need with available funding in the public combined, we call the Combined Public Assistance Fund Group. And that was the idea. And again, those are monies that are supposed to be spent. They're reimbursement dollars, and they're also levy dollars that were brought over, but not necessarily spent as a local match when the year ended.
And Director, to clarify, am I correct that the PA offset is taken after you made the calculation of the 13.6 million deficit? So the deficit is 13.6, it's not 25.6, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In this report, we're showing the levy subsidy amounts after our staff have made adjustments of up to $12 million in the case of 2013. So they're reducing the levy need in this report by that $12 million, and we're showing the $12 million as a separate line item at the bottom of the report.
So what you're projecting is that we would have an operating deficit of 16.6 million, of which you would deal with by taking 12 million from the Public Assistance Fund and 1.6 million from the levy fund. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, when you go back to, yes, when you look at that number, but those have been further revised. But if you look at that column, that's how you interpret the column you just read. We tend to focus on that projection column. That's where we believe we will be at the end of this year, the one that's in the box.
Okay.
We're showing you, just to clarify, we're showing in this report, but also the summary table that's been in the last two executive summaries for the second quarter and for the budget update. Remember, there's a summary table that kind of encapsulates the levy use. We're giving you both the structural deficit in the levy fund, including the PA match, but then we're also showing you the total need. So the total need is roughly half levy reserve and roughly half coming from the PA reserve. So you're getting both pieces of information to interpret, but yes, when we look at what the impact on the levy fund is net, it's that number, the 13.
Councilman Greenspan.
So just so I'm clear in trying to understand this, because I believe we were under the impression that of the allocations by program, the $208 million, that netted already in that number was a PA offset. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. If you add the 12 million at the bottom, our spend is about 220 million, just north of 220. So you take that number where it says offset and add that back in, it's been pulled out. But when you see the operating surplus deficit, we tried to give you the total. The 13.6 is the true deficit. We wanted you to have that number clearly. That includes the amounts coming from the PA. So the real deficit is 13.6.
Just to reiterate, which I've mentioned before in committee meetings, we've identified since probably first quarter and going forward, we think the ongoing local match to County Health and Human Services is about the $220+ million mark. Now, in going back a few years, that was accomplished almost exclusively through using levy dollars. What we had to do this year and plan to do into next year is provide that roughly $220 or so million match through a combination of levy dollars and PA reserve, which is, again, some of that is derived from the levy fund. We're transferring county money in the levy funds over to the operating funds for the individual health and human service program budgets. But again, that top line number is around that $220 million budgeted number for supporting health and human services at the county.
And once again, how much money is in the PA fund?
I think we're projecting at the end of this year, I believe 35 million. We can get back to you with the specific amount. What we're doing is allocating amongst the various subsidiary funds that have balances, and we're using those balances to offset levy need. So I think it's 35 million. I'm doing it on my memory right now, but we anticipate that amount to not be less than very much this year. If you look at the 2012 projection, we're actually not having to tap it as much as we originally planned, so that's good. So now we're going to set up again for next year and assume a $12 million use of that 35 million or so reserve, combined reserve.
And that fund gets replenished how? How do funds go into the levy fund, into the PA fund?
It's reimbursement dollars from the state and federal government. And other sources too. There are other sources, but those are the main sources that we have that reimbursement chain directly from the state, whether it's direct allocations from the state or transfer payments from the federal government to the state, to the counties, to locally administer federal public assistance programs. Some of our other smaller agencies do have other sources of funding. They have some miscellaneous intergovernmental funding. There's some private dollars that come in, but that's by and large the bulk of that share into those operating funds is from that reimbursement process.
And do you expect that to continue at an inflow rate of about 12 million a year?
The 12 million a year is the cash match, Councilman Greenspan, from that reserve in the PA.
No, I understand how to reserve, but I'm trying to determine.
Well, the amount's much higher than 12 million. It's several, I think, it's probably approaching 200 million as far as all the reimbursement dollars combined for the mainline public assistance. So each year, you're bringing in money based on what you've spent, and you're demonstrating to the government what you've spent. And you're also bringing in levy dollars to cover that gap if there is one for those programs. And a lot of these transfers, whether they're from the levy fund or from the state, are based on an estimate. In some cases, we do all cases, we always do a reconciliation the following year for the state piece. But for our piece, when we're requesting to transfer levy dollars over to the operating funds, we're doing that on a projection, usually as of third quarter. So at times, we are transferring more than was necessary when the year is over, and we do our review of year-end results. So you do have money accumulating that way. Another way that money may accumulate over the amount that was actually needed to implement a program. Last year was a case where there was some leftover miscellaneous reimbursement revenue from the federal government that came to the county. It was a significant amount, so those dollars lay in reserve if they're not spent that year. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does from time to time.
Councilman, any more?
No.
Councilman Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you come here on the 219 or sooner, as it says, or sooner, I like that part, will there already be implemented steps from January 1st to February 19th that you will have already started the savings? Or are you bringing us the plan on 219?
To the council member through the chair. In fact, many of our staff that work on human services are here today. It's our anticipation in talking with Director Rubino, before we come on 219, we'll have a pretty good idea. I think this is hopefully showing you that we have an idea of where we're going to be at the end of the year. We'll close the year. We'll immediately begin looking at changes that we know of, roll those out, and our hope would be that no later than the end of January, to be able to share with you what we're seeing so that we can comply with the request, I think, of the committee or the council. I'm not sure who made the request of February 19 to have something to you.
Well, I just want to come back to that point. Will there be steps of actual savings by 219 that are implemented as opposed to a concept that you want to go forward from 219? And the reason I ask that is because at that point in time, 2 months of the year are already gone. You cannot recover those from any cost savings, because the cost, if you're not going to implement them. So now you're down, and probably by the time we get done with hearings, you're down to less than 3/4 of the year to make up the full impact of the 13.6 million. And so now that's, even though you say it's 13.6 million, that's tantamount to almost 16 to 17 million if you were going to do that, start the implementation of the savings, because you have to then annualize that into what's left of the remaining part of the year, unless you're going to get started like almost immediately.
To the council member through the chair, I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly, but we wouldn't be implementing savings, but let's say we get to January and we know we've budgeted for 10 positions. We know there's only going to be 9. We'll immediately reduce the spend. So there's no savings, but we know there's going to be no need for it going forward. So we would immediately know that and put that into place.
Okay.
But we wouldn't do it on January 1 till we're sure there's not going to be 10 positions. There's only going to be 9. Once we know that for certain, then we build that into the budget and carry it forward.
And then when you come back on the 219, you're going to have a vehicle to address the entire deficit? Is that what the intent is?
To the council member through the chair, no, we would not be addressing the entire deficit. We had planned on using $12 million of PA dollars. And so you, as council, understand what we were thinking. When we said 35 or 36 million, we assumed if the PA dollars do not move, if you budget $12 million a year, that's 13, 14, 15. We're out 3 years. Again, not that we want to wait 3 years for council and the administration to work together, but we're trying to look at it as if, hey, we do have some time, but we do have an issue that we need to address, and we can't wait till 15 to do it. We need to do it before then.
And in 13 and 14 going forward, are there any additional programs or policies that the executive's office is going to be putting in place that are actually included in here? For example, educational programs.
To the council member through the chair, none that have been put in place that we know of at this point. We're going to be working with the HHS staff on what those programs are.
Any visions of things that could be added in the future are not built into this budget either?
To the councilor through the chair, no, they're not built in. I guess the one vision I have is I'm hoping that home prices keep going up because we'll see increased property tax revenues if that does happen.
I would point out that that since we know the projection is less than what was in the budget, there was discussion at the last couple meetings around why not amend the budget now to more accurately reflect what we think is actually going to happen. And the administration said, we're not quite prepared to do that, and you asked that it be moved into the first quarter, and we're willing to do so, but wanted to set up a specific timetable, and that's what we did here. On February 19th, we're going to get the recommendation for the amendments to the 2013 budget. Now, it is not necessary that we entirely eliminate the $13 million deficit in 2013 because we do have reserves. But what we do need to do is to change the trajectory, because we cannot have a $13 million operating deficit indefinitely. And so that's where the second part comes in, where we have the longer range plan for 2014 through 2017. And the hope is that by 2017, that we will be able to eliminate the deficit, and in the meantime, it will be getting smaller and smaller, and so that we can get to 2017, have the deficit eliminated, and still have a decent level of reserves above the target that we made. So that's kind of what the plan is that's reflected here. Councilman Germana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Rubino, the Public Assistant Fund being a reimbursement fund, you explained how sometimes the reimbursements come later than the year. I'm just wondering, how did it get to 35 million? Was it initially budgeted, or how long did it take to accumulate that?
Mr. Chairman and Councilman Germain, I think the main causes of building a reserve in the PA funds is, one, if we're transferring more than necessary levy dollars over to the PA side. Again, we're basing it off a projection. In the past 2 or 3 years, we've had additional or one-time reimbursement dollars coming through. The state's looking at Cuyahoga is the largest county in Ohio. Where's a good place to deploy the funds to be spent? And those are the two main areas, because the reimbursement, there's a reconciliation against what we've spent to implement public assistance programs. So you're not going to see, I think in most cases, a large amount over what you've spent. So I think it's the latter two, or the former two, rather, reasons that I provided.
Any other discussion on amendment number 5? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. You got in under the wire.
Yeah, thanks, I appreciate that. I'm not comfortable with, I think Councilman Schron was mentioning this, also alluding to this. I'm not comfortable with waiting until February 19th. You know, I'd be comfortable with January 15th, 45 days or so from now. Nothing, I can't imagine, I know that we have very competent financial professionals. I can't imagine they're not aware of anything that would change dramatically from the revenue side or from the expense side between now and then, where they can't begin to provide some guidance as to what they're thinking insofar as bringing this amendment, complying with this amendment. As Mr. Schron said, by the time you wait until February 19th, it's another month that's gone by. By the time we've had a chance to consider it, go through our proper due diligence and our course of action, we're looking at probably April, mid-March, before we have an opportunity to weigh in on it. And then we're a third of the way into the year, or a quarter of the way into the year.
Let me explain the thinking behind the February 19th date. The administration originally asked us to wait until after the first quarter numbers had come in, which would have taken us until about sometime in May. And we said, well, that's too long, but you should have the opportunity to look at the end of the year 2012 numbers, and which should be available around the end of January, and then it gives just a couple of weeks to put the recommendations together. But I would further add, in support of Councilman Schron and Councilman Greenspan's direction, that there is nothing whatsoever to prevent the administration from implementing changes and adjustments in spending levels and courses of actions as they determine their desirability, and that we kind of expect this to be an ongoing process. But the February 19th submission gives us the opportunity to review, and if it would help, if I'm still the chairman of the Finance and Budget Committee in the next session, I would be happy to convene a meeting right after the first of the year and just have a discussion and ask the administration to present to us as to what kind of operational changes they're making in real time as we prepare for the February submission. Would that be helpful?
I understand what you're saying. I just don't, I just think it's important that we set the tone as to what we expect from a budget that has a deficit to being more balanced, or at least a plan to take us on a more favorable trajectory. 30 days might not seem like a lot, but 30 days is 1/12 of the year, and 30 days in our budget is significant dollars as we eat away at reserves. And so I'm still in favor of January 15th. I'd like to make an amendment. If it's seconded, if it's voted down, it is what it is. But, like I said, Wade and Matt Rubino are very competent. I'm sure they've done projections. They know what the rest of the year is going to look like. Come up with whatever programmatic and operational efficiencies, which we were told when we approved this budget last year would have taken place by now, would be able to be addressed and presented to us. So that's why I'm cautious on this and would prefer January 15th be the day.
So, did I hear a motion to change February 19th to January 15th?
I'll make that motion.
Second? Okay. Any discussion? Yes, Director. Okay, Director.
Thank you, Councilman Tron. Mr. Chairman, to members of the committee, I would request the 19th, and I think you described it well. We want to close the year. We want to get a month's worth of activity, and with all due respect to the Finance Committee, and that's the committee I work with, there's one other party to this dance, and that's our HHS staff. And we had anticipated having some conversations with the HHS committee and the chairman of that committee before we come back here like a bull in a china shop with amendments and changes to programs. And so that was the rationale to allow that time, that month of January, to have HHS conversations and finance conversations. That's what we're requesting the time for.
Okay. Councilman Tron.
Yeah, as much as I am a fan of speed, I also recognize you have to close the books out and you have to make intelligent decisions. But that being said, there's no reason that you can't still get a sense of where you are, and that's why I was pressuring to make sure you feel free to make the decisions to start to save the money. You don't have to wait till the 19th if you can see the tea leaves as to which way they're going in the cup. So I would wholeheartedly encourage you to make those changes, but I'm not in favor of shutting your timeline down, because I know you do have to close the books out. And as we all know, there's going to be adjustments that take place. There's both up and down, forward and backward. As good as your firm is, not firm, as good as your company, we'll get there, as good as your office is, keep going back to that private sector stuff, I am willing to give you the time to close your books out.
Any other?
Well, Mr. Chair, not
Yeah, which means I'm going to vote against
I
Mr.
understand.
Greenspan's trying to shorten the time.
I can read the tea leaves on that one. I guess, having done not in a government capacity what Mr. Steen does, I would say by now there's probably a good sense as to where the year end is going to close, within 1 or 2 percentage points on the revenue and the expenses. That's where I come from an experience perspective, that to begin the discussions and to have a plan in place at the end of the day I think it's more critical to support a January 15th date. It's not as if we're looking 8 months out or 6 months out. We're within the last 30 days of the year. I would imagine projections are already in place, or a sense of where revenue is going to be in January from the property taxes. We know what the reserve is going to be for those who don't pay. We have history on that. We have an idea of where the expenses are going to fall. We have a history on that. Understanding, as Mr. Schron said, there will be adjustments, year-end adjustments, get it. But we get not to quote, Ms. Simon's going to look at me when I say this, not to quote the iceberg quote again from last week, but we see what's there. It's not as if this is not in front of us. To be proactive today, I think, would be more prudent. That's my end of my statement. And let me just say this, by the way, to Mr. Steen. If you did present this to us on the 26th, I don't remember getting it, so I'll owe you an apology if I insulted you in that respect. But I don't recall getting this.
Okay. Do you want the amendment voted on, or do you want to?
I have a second, so unless the second's withdrawn, yes, I would.
Would you like to withdraw? No. Okay. We're going to call the roll on the amendment, which is to change the date to to January 15th. Yes is to change the date to January 15th.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Brady? No. Mr. Germana? No. Mr. Gallagher's not here, I'm sorry. Mr. Schron?
No.
Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones?
No.
Mr. Rogers? No. Ms. Simon?
No.
Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Ms. Conley? No. Motion does not carry.
Okay, the amendment to the amendment does not become part of the amendment. Any further discussion on amendment number 5?
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Germana.
this is getting a little bit far out from this exactly, but, you know, we're all waiting about what's going to happen with the fiscal cliff. And in today's Plain Dealer, we heard about the possibility that food stamps, or whatever the formal name for it is in jeopardy because of the trajectory of where that's been going. I'm just wondering, I know the fiscal cliff doesn't affect the funding of the Health and Human Services levy, but how's this related to food? If this county was subjected to a large cutback, can you answer to that at all?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Germain, I probably wouldn't be able to give you specifics, but I can tell you conceptually, if the federal government elects to reduce the amount of funding that eventually finds its way to localities, then we'll have to do pretty much the same level of service provision with less federal dollars. What those amounts are, I couldn't tell you. I know TANF, which is the block grant, the reinvented welfare, if you will, that is right now exempt from sequestration. Doesn't mean other sources of funding that flow from the federal to the state government to counties wouldn't be impacted. But regardless of how that funding stream may change, we know that the levels of service we have to provide, especially for the mainline human services, will be where they're at now or higher. So we would have to do more with more local match, most likely, would be the short answer. It's hard to get in exact amounts right now because there hasn't been any concrete projections or offering from the federal side.
Any other questions on amendment number 5? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Ayes have it. Amendment number 5 is included in the resolution. Are there any other amendments to the resolution that anyone wants to offer? Okay, seeing none, having completed work on the amendments, we do need to pass the resolution on December 11th to meet the deadline that's in our 2-year budget ordinance, and so I would ask if there is a motion to refer Resolution 2012-0232 to the full council with a recommendation for passage under second reading suspension.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Schwan and seconded by Councilman Germana. The clerk will, I'll ask if there's any further discussion. Hearing none, the clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Mr. Jones? Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The resolution is recommended to the full council, and we just have one more item to go, and I would ask the clerk to please read item number 5C on the agenda.
Resolution number 2012-0252, a resolution amending resolution number 2012-0182, dated September 25th, 2012, which accepted the rates as determined by the Budget Commission and which authorized the necessary tax levies and certified them to the county fiscal officer to change the general fund inside millage from 0.43 to 0.60 and the general fund bond retirement inside millage from 1.02 to 0.85 and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
I would like to ask Director Rubino to explain to us what this resolution does and why it's needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'd mentioned in previous meetings, we did sell bonds, and as part of the bond sale, the county realized an issue premium or premium over the par amount of the bonds we sold, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We've had an expectation we'd be generating additional cash to use to offset the county's annual debt service as part of this offering. So when we adopted the rates, we did not have the assumption built in. We did not have the full assumption built in, knowing that we may have to come back and request to amend the way we split the inside millage, that 1.45 mils that we split between bond retirement and operations. Now that we know the final amount of premium realized, the only way to spend those dollars is to change the way this millage is split. So that's why we're asking for an increase back to the general fund side, going from the 0.43 back up to a 0.6. And the debt service side for next year, rather than being 1.03, I believe, it'll be 0.85. And that allows us to, over the next 2 years, our plan is to be able to spend out that unencumbered cash that we brought in as part of our offering. So county went out and sold bonds, and we ended up generating about $7.5 million of additional cash. We need to use that cash. We can only use it for annual debt service. And the only way we can do that is to artificially lower, in a sense, the millage we're generating or levying for debt retirement, so we can, in a sense, spend down or burn through that extra cash. And our anticipation is to do that over 2013 and 14, and then rates would be reset in 2015 based on expectation of any changes in assessed valuation if they happen here and there. Expectation on combined current collection rates. So we're looking at approximately shifting back to debt service fund in 2015 of about $3.3 million.
Director, you said that the premium that we could get was capped at $7.5 million.
Yes.
Does that mean that we were able to get a lower interest rate than we would have gotten if a higher premium were available?
It's, Mr. Chairman, it's a variety of things that are going on. When we were planning for the issuance based on the structure, without having any limits on how the banker could structure the bonds, meaning how high the coupons could be and other factors, we could generate maybe 11 or 12 million in extra cash, be placed in the bond retirement fund. It could offset debt service costs. About 2 weeks ago, Bond Counsel advised us that there is a provision in Ohio Revised Code, the chapter, which is 133, that governs how localities can issue general obligation bonds, that we have a threshold of how much premium we can generate. And that is capped by the first 3 years of interest payments. So that gives you your threshold. So for our bond deal, for our new money, we had a threshold of about $7.5 million. We couldn't generate more than $7.5 million when we sold the bonds. So that's one piece. Now the second piece, more germane to Chairman Miller's question, does that mean we realize slightly lower interest costs? In a way, yes, because what we were able to do is reduce some of the coupons or annual payments that we were willing to offer investors. So instead of having 5% coupons and some of the maturities in the late 25, 26 maturity range, we could bring those down to 4%. So if you're paying investors less, your cost of funds is less. You are generating less in the way of a premium, how much you're selling the bonds over their face value, but it does slightly edge down or bring down your cost of borrowing. So for the example in the new money, for a 25-year issuance, we have a true interest cost of under 3%. I think it's 2.9%, which is very low for borrowing money at 25 years.
Questions by my colleagues. Councilman Tron.
What, if any, effect will it have as far as the adjustment on the inside mills for any of the homeowners? Will there be any effect that'll flow through to their inside millage in their individual school districts?
Councilman Tron, it would not impact how much property owners are paying, but if they would see a breakout of, on their tax bill, how much goes to general operations and how much goes to bond retirement, those amounts, how they're split would differ, but the total that is generated by the 1.45 inside mills would not change. It's just how the county elects to allocate that portion of the unvoted levy would change.
But the inside mills never goes down as far as
Correct.
as far as the view of the taxpayer. So by shifting it, does that have any effect on?
No, it does
Okay.
not impact their total tax bill, only how the county is electing to spend the money or is required to spend the money.
I always loved having to give this explanation when I was on the school board of inside mills and outside mills and
Yes.
voted mills and all that fun stuff that nobody ever understood.
The unvoted mill is a little more basic. It does not move up or down with tax rates. Unlike voted levies, we know if assessed valuation comes down, voted levies can move up to that voted cap. The inside millage always stays at the amount, the 1.45, cap at 10 for the county. So the county is sharing in 1.45 of the 10 mills unvoted for the county as a whole. The county being the entire, not just county government, but county itself.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Uh,
Sorry, Mr. Jones?
Jones and then Greenspan.
Just like you to explain again why the need to change the balance between the operating and the, as you say, the debt service.
Councilman Jones, the rates as originally adopted, we were basically levying without the anticipation of this large premium. So now we have another source. The main source to pay debt service on general obligation bonds is property tax from ad valorem property taxes. We have an additional source when we generate a sizable premium such as this. So we can spend those dollars and able to spend the money. We're going to levy less need from property taxes for 2 years, so we can spend down the money that was generated from the sale. It's the only way we can do that. Those rates are basically dialed into your annual debt service. So you back into how much you need. If your annual debt service for the year is $32 million, for example, for the county, we need to set those rates to generate $32 million net of any other outside revenue sources, and there are a few that come into the county that help offset debt service. In this case, we had a sizable additional revenue source in the way of a premium to help fund debt service for the next 2 years.
Councilman Greenspan.
Yeah, thank you. So fundamentally what we're doing is we're getting more in than we have debt. We're taking the balance and transferring it to the general fund. Is that fundamentally it?
No, Councilman Greenspan, we are freeing up property tax revenue for the general fund in the exact amount of the premium we generated from the sale. And again, this was anticipated. We do long-term planning for our long-term financing. So going back as early as end of 2010, we assumed when we'd be selling bonds in 2012, there would be some sort of premium revenue. Now, the estimates 2.5 years ago were a lot lower, probably $1 million or $1.5 million. As we got closer to the sale and we know what the market will provide if we go out for an offering, we're able to change that projection. It probably went up to $5 million a year ago. We worked with our senior managing underwriter to determine what the premium could be. And then once we had our final opinion from bond counsel that you're capped at this amount, we were able to more closely anticipate or estimate what the rates should be set at in order to accommodate collection of property tax revenue and other sources to make sure debt service could be paid next year.
So our debt service is still being handled. There's a little excess because our premiums are higher.
Right, temporarily, we have temporary revenue. But again, it was anticipated. This was not something that came out of the blue.
And so these funds go into the general fund. They go into the general fund reserve? Are these coming out of operating capital, or do these
Well,
go
the premium specifically is placed in the bond retirement fund. That's a legal requirement. So by placing that revenue there, you're able to shift revenue that would have come in through property taxes temporarily over to the general fund side for 2 years. Now, we get into 2015, we're assuming we'll have to shift about $3.3 million out of the general fund back to debt retirement, all things remaining the same.
Well, that's where I was going with this next, because obviously this activity is not going to continue. Is this ordinance in perpetuity, or does it sunset? I don't recall reading.
It's once a year we have to adopt the rates. So you'll have an opportunity again in September of next year. And we'll do the same type of assessment. We'll look at collection, look at assessed valuation, what's our annual debt service, and we'll make an estimate on what we think the rate should be. Again, the rates are tailored specifically to make sure with property tax revenue and other sources, we cover our debt service.
And the amount of money you expect, the dollar amount, is what in this period?
Or annual debt service?
No. The impact will have on the general fund.
3.3 million?
3.3 million, one time 3.3. And I guess is that going into the general reserve fund?
It goes into the general fund,
reserve?
correct. It shows up in the property tax estimate on our income statement. It would show up in that line. Right now it's 13.9 million is the anticipated amount for property tax collections in 2013, and that would include the shift of the rates.
So in the future, when we look at the general fund reserve and we see the reserves available on balance, where we're drawing money out of that reserve,
correct.
Will you, in your forward planning, you said maybe in 2015 we're going to have to go the other way with this. will you project that out, that we're going to be utilizing?
Yes, we will, but again, we're also scheduled to go into the market in 2015. So this is a cyclical thing.
Okay.
It's the nature of tax-exempt municipal bonds. They always generate some sort of premium. That amount changes with the structure of the offering and also with the current market conditions. So it is a cyclical revenue source, but it is an ongoing revenue source, even though it doesn't happen every year.
Okay, great, thank you.
Director, does the most recent roll-up that we received as part of this budget process fully reflect the premium?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman.
It does, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on Resolution 2012-0252? Director, you do need this by the end of the year, is that correct?
I do, yes.
Okay. So I will make a motion to refer Resolution 2012-0252 to the full council with a recommendation for passage under second reading suspension. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is recommended. Is there any miscellaneous business? Councilman Greenspan.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I just want clarity. This goes back to the previous item that we discussed. The document that is dated November 26th, we see a 2013 total projection column and then a recommended budget column.
Yes.
All right. My assumption and my vote was predicated on the fact that we were discussing the total projection column as the operational mechanism to which the county will begin operating in 2013 under, not the recommended budget number. And there's a $14 million difference. I mean, you understand where I'm going?
Yes.
That shows an HHS levy reserve utilization of only 1.6 million versus the recommended budget of 15.1 million. So that's the assumption I made, that operationally the county was going to operate under the total 2013 total projection column as its operating model. Is that?
Councilman Greenspan, yes, but I want to clarify the recommended budget would be the appropriated authority, the level of authority to which these programs can operate under. Our projection, based on what we've seen this year and going into next year, holding those trends forward, we believe that there will be, again, underspending of the authorized appropriation level that's in the recommended budget. So the projection gives you an idea, how are we comparing against the plan, the budget, recommended budget being the plan. Now, we didn't alter the plan very much. For the recommended budget, remember, the only changes we made were updates to revenue estimates, and there's two types. We updated the projection for the levy, and that's, again, that $211 million at the top of that report was last year. Now we know where rates are assessed valuations are going, so we have a better idea of what the property tax collection will be. The side you can't see directly in that report would be in the public assistance side, in the operating funds, how much reimbursement revenue that they will be receiving, and that was dialed down by about $4 million based on some circumstances we're aware of. Everything else, there were a few additions to the budget, namely one to increase budgets for the employer share of hospitalization, which we talked about on the 13th of November, and then we had one minor adjustment to accommodate the bargaining unit agreement that was approved for child support enforcement workers. So those were the only changes, by and large, for our spending model in the recommended budget. So our projection will pick up, we'll flip to projection mode once you approve an authority to spend the budget. Going into January, we'll flip into projection mode, and then we'll start immediately comparing the trends we see in revenue and expenditure levels to the appropriated authority. And
that's what I'm looking, if I'm looking at the recommended budget, if you're asking for this is where I'm trying to get my arms around, once again, having, I honestly don't remember seeing this, so having looking at this for the first time, is the recommendation that we approve spend of $222 million in the HHS levy, or the 208 in the projections, or do we revert back to the 2011 resolution at 211?
No, Councilman, the request is to approve the recommended budget, so the $222 million of levy expenditures.
All right, I was a little unclear on that at the time.
Director, to follow up on that, I'm presuming right now there's a pretty large difference between what's authorized in the budget and what the projection is. But the expectation is that after we do the amendments following the February 19th update, that gap should narrow considerably and that the budget should be much closer to what the projection is. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And remember, we will be using the projection as guidance, but we won't necessarily be going through line by line and setting the appropriate authority line by line to the projection. There's going to be, that's one piece of it. When we look at one large area of expenditure in the HHS budgets, the client services line, or where we have community service providers, there needs to be some legwork happening on the county side, the administration side, making an evaluation. Here's where we think we can bring those appropriation levels down, but also working with the actual community organizations that will be impacted if the county is posturing as we're going to spend less, we're going to spend based on a projection. And then also looking at staffing levels, and what does that mean? Where do we need staff the most? And is there budgetary capacity in other places where we don't need to fill positions, or we don't need the same level of budgetary authority?
Anything else?
Well, yeah, hold on, Mr. Chair. Looking at the resolution, then, there should be an amendment to it, or the resolution itself actually authorizes a reserve spend of $15.75 million. The recommended budget that was submitted on the 26th has a different amount.
Mr. Chairman, we can correct it. I don't think we updated that section of the resolution to comport with the latest. So now that we have amendments, we can make sure that's updated in the resolution.
Well, and that's where I'm going. I'd rather have it reflect the projection number, not and make the projection the recommended budget.
Mr. Chairman, I can receive guidance on this, but I believe the way that the reserve ordinance reads, that it would be the budget, not the projection that we're requesting.
Correct. And that would be my recommendation, is that the recommended 2013 budget be amended to be the projection.
But I think that would conflict with Resolution 0058 that we adopted that created the reserve policy for the levy funds. I'm not positive. I don't have it in front of me.
All right, we'll have to look into this matter.
Well, this goes to the general discussion that we had,
Sure.
where we talked about, well, should we amend the budget now? Because the expenditure levels are going to be less than what's in the budget. And the administration said, well, we're not ready to do that right now. We would like to do that early in the new year. And so in response, we said, well, we'll go with the budget as is for now, but we'll set up this timetable, which is going to start with the February 19th update. So hopefully we're going to revise the budget at that time, but I don't think that we're prepared to change the budget now from what's in the budget to what's in the projection.
Well, then to my point, then let's just make the resolution equal what the budget that we approved last year, which would be a spend then of a reserve utilization of $3.4 million. That's what the budget we approved last year had the 2013 reserve utilization of $3,482,000.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify, just going back to Ordinance 0058, I think it specifically details that we have to place that section in a subsequent budget resolution if we surpass or go below the 15% threshold. When we adopted 0291, the current budget we're operating under, we didn't go below that threshold, so there was no need. So I don't think we would want to use the $3 million plus number in the section of the new resolution. I think we want to use the budgeted or authorized use of reserves in the resolution we're submitting.
That's the 15,750.
The 15 plus, correct. Yeah. And we'll make sure it is exactly tied to the reporting after we've have all the amendments in.
Director, will you work with Councilman Greenspan and help verify what the exact correct number is, and if it needs to be changed from the number that's currently in the resolution, you can bring forward an amendment on the 11th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I believe that this will conclude our Finance and Budget Committee work for 2012, and I would like to thank all of my colleagues for their help and cooperation on budget matters this year. We have had a lot. Has anybody signed in for public comment not related to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, no one has signed in to speak.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, and we are adjourned.